A canine dog wouldn't stop barking at a bookshelf, but what he revealed shocked everyone. It started like any ordinary welfare check: a quiet deputy, a rich man's perfect house, and a loyal dog who just wouldn't calm down. But when that shelf moved, everything changed. Behind the polished wood was something no one was supposed to see, a secret that powerful people would do anything to bury. Suddenly, the deputy's career, her safety, and even her life were on the line. The dog wasn't barking at books. He was warning her of something far darker. Now, hunted by the very people she trusted, she has to decide: follow the law that betrayed her, or follow the truth that could get her killed. What was hidden behind that bookshelf? And how far will the ones in power go to keep it secret? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Judge Harlan Voss's lakeside mansion. Deputy Lyndon Price stood at attention in the grand foyer, her canine partner Y3 close at her side. The German Shepherd's amber eyes scanned the room with the same careful attention she'd come to expect during their 3 months working together. "Just a routine welfare check, Your Honor," Lyndon explained, keeping her tone professionally neutral. "We received a call from one of your neighbors about unusual sounds." Judge Voss smiled graciously, his silver hair catching the light. He looked every bit the distinguished legal figure she'd heard about since moving to the county. "Oh, that would be my renovation work in the study. Please, come see for yourself." As they followed him down a hallway lined with framed legal certificates and awards, Lyndon noticed Y3's ears perk forward. The dog's muscled frame tensed beneath her hand. The study was an impressive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Sawdust and paint cans suggested recent work, just as the judge had said. "As you can see, Deputy, nothing sinister here," Voss said with a gentle laugh. "Though I appreciate our citizens' vigilance." Lyndon was about to thank him and leave when Swazi 3 suddenly pulled away from her side. The dog made a beeline for a massive mahogany bookcase against the far wall, his nose working frantically. "Y3, heel!" Lyndon commanded sharply. But for the first time since they'd been paired, the shepherd completely ignored her. 3 planted himself in front of the bookcase and began barking, sharp, insistent barks that echoed off the high ceiling. His tail was rigid, body coiled with purpose. "I'm so sorry, Your Honor," Lyndon said, moving to retrieve her partner. "He's never behaved like this before." "Perhaps he smells a mouse," Voss suggested. His smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. "These old houses, you know." Lyndon reached for Y3's collar, but he dodged her grasp. The dog's barking grew more frenzied as he scratched at the base of the bookshelf. That's when she noticed it. The slight gap between the shelf and the hardwood floor, the barely visible wheel tracks in the dust. Her trained eye caught other details: fresh paint on one wall that didn't quite match, a faint draft where there shouldn't be one. "Y3, what is it?" she murmured, running her hand along the shelf's edge. Her fingers found a slight ridge. "Deputy, I really must insist," Voss began, but Lyndon was already pushing against the bookcase. It slid smoothly on hidden wheels, revealing a roughly plastered panel in the wall behind it. The change in Voss's demeanor was instant. "This is an invasion of privacy. I'll be speaking with Sheriff Haskett about this immediately." But Lyndon barely heard him. Because Y3 had gone silent, pressing his nose against a hairline crack in the plaster. And now she could hear it, too. The faintest sound of breathing from behind the wall. "Is someone in there?" she called out, pressing her ear to the panel. For a moment, only silence answered. Then, so quiet she almost missed it. "Help me." Lyndon's heart pounded as she drew her flashlight. "This is the police. I'm going to get you out." "Deputy Price, you are trespassing." Voss's voice had turned to ice. "Leave now, or face serious consequences." She ignored him, searching for an edge to the panel. 3 whined anxiously, pawing at a specific spot. There, a slight seam. Lyndon wedged her flashlight into it and pulled. The plaster cracked, revealing the edge of a metal door. "Please," the voice whispered again. "They'll kill me like they killed Handler Boone." Lyndon's blood ran cold. Handler Boone, Y3's previous partner, had died in what was ruled an accidental fire 6 months ago. She'd never met him, but his death had created the K9 unit vacancy she now filled. With renewed urgency, she worked her fingers into the gap and pulled harder. The hidden door groaned open, releasing a blast of stale air. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a cramped concrete vault, and huddled in the corner, a thin teenage girl with tangled auburn hair. The girl blinked against the sudden light, raising one trembling hand to shield her eyes. In her other hand, she clutched a phone so tightly her knuckles were white. "I'm Deputy Price," Lyndon said gently, holstering her flashlight and holding out her hands to show she meant no harm. "You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" "Ivy," the girl whispered. "Ivy McCrae." Her green eyes darted fearfully past Lyndon to where Voss stood. "Don't let him near me, please." Withry positioned himself protectively between the girl and the judge, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Lyndon's mind raced as she helped Ivy to her feet. The girl's legs buckled, and Lyndon caught her before she could fall. "How long have you been in there?" Lyndon asked, though the girl's pale skin and weakened state told her it had been far too long. "Since I saw them," Ivy's voice cracked. "Since I saw the sheriff and the judge planning the fire at the community center. They were arguing about insurance money. I tried to run, but they caught me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Handler Boone. He found out too. That's why they killed him." A sound behind them made Lyndon turn. Voss had moved to his desk and was reaching for the phone. "I'm calling Sheriff Haskett to sort out this ridiculous situation," he said smoothly. "A confused runaway making wild accusations, hardly worth damaging your career over, Deputy Price." "Don't," Ivy pleaded, gripping Lyndon's arm. "The sheriff's part of it. They use the fires to collect insurance money. They've been doing it for years." Lyndon's mind flashed to the string of suspicious fires that had plagued the county recently, businesses and homes that had burned just after massive insurance policy updates, cases that were quickly closed despite questionable circumstances. She thought of Handler Boone, who had been investigating one such fire when his car went off the road and burst into flames. The event that had seemed tragic but straightforward now took on a far darker meaning. "Your Honor," Lyndon said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Step away from the phone. You're under arrest." Voss's distinguished facade cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. "You have no idea what you're doing, Deputy. One call to Haskett and your career is over. Who do you think they'll believe? A newly transferred officer or a judge with 40 years' service to this community?" "They'll believe the evidence," Lyndon replied, nodding toward the phone Ivy still clutched. "I'm guessing that's why she was worth keeping alive? She recorded something she shouldn't have?" The girl nodded. "They didn't know I was filming when I saw them at the community center. I managed to hide the phone before they caught me." Y3's growl deepened as Voss took a step toward them. The judge's mask had completely slipped now, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "This is your last warning, Deputy. Walk away now. Forget what you've seen." Lyndon drew her weapon, keeping herself between Ivy and the judge. "On your knees, hands behind your head." For a moment she thought he might resist, but then his shoulders sagged, and he slowly sank to his knees. As she moved to handcuff him, Lyndon heard the distant wail of approaching sirens, likely triggered by her welfare check taking too long. "It's over," she told Ivy gently. "You're safe now." The girl sobbed with relief, sliding down the wall to sit next to Y3, who nuzzled her hand comfortingly. As Lyndon secured the judge and radioed for backup, she noticed the shepherd's alert gaze never leaving Voss. Even now, Y3 was protecting them, just as he must have tried to protect Handler Boone. "Good boy," she whispered, and saw his tail wag once in acknowledgement. His instincts had led them to the truth, and now justice would finally be served for Ivy, for Boone, and for all the others who had suffered under the corruption of those meant to protect them. The wailing sirens grew louder, echoing across the lake. Lyndon's radio crackled with dispatch requesting a status update. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps thundered up the mansion's wooden steps. Sheriff Burl Haskett burst through the study door, his face flushed red with exertion and something else. Anger, or maybe fear. "What in blazes is going on here?" he demanded, taking in the scene. Judge Voss on his knees, Ivy trembling against the wall, and Lyndon with her weapon still drawn. "Sheriff," Lyndon began, "I've discovered evidence of—" "Evidence?" Haskett cut her off, his narrowed eyes fixed on the hidden vault. "All I see is a deputy conducting an unauthorized search during a routine welfare check." He turned to Voss. "Your Honor, are you all right?" The change in Voss was immediate and unsettling. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of wounded dignity. "I'm fine, Burl. Just shocked by this invasion." He slowly got to his feet, brushing off his knees. "I can't imagine what possessed Deputy Price to act so rashly." "Sir," Lyndon said firmly, "I found this girl imprisoned in a hidden room. She has evidence on her phone of—" "Phone?" Haskett interrupted again, his gaze snapping to the device in Ivy's grip. "Hand it over, young lady. That's evidence in a breaking and entering case." "Breaking and entering?" Lyndon couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "She's been held captive." Now, Voss said smoothly, straightening his tie. "I understand the girl may have spun quite a tale, Deputy, but the truth is I've never seen her before in my life. Clearly she broke into my home and hid when she heard someone coming." Ivy shrank back against the wall. "That's not true. I recorded them talking about the community center fire. They were arguing about the insurance money." "Give me the phone," Haskett ordered, stepping toward her. Y3 moved between them, hackles raised, a warning growl rumbling in his throat. "Control your dog, Deputy," Haskett snapped. "That's an order." Lyndon stood her ground. "Y3, stay." She turned to Haskett. "Sir, this girl needs medical attention, and her accusations need to be properly investigated." "What needs investigating is your conduct," Haskett cut in. His face had grown darker, more threatening. "Breaking into a judge's home, traumatizing an upstanding member of our community with wild accusations. I'm placing you on immediate suspension pending review." "But sir, hand over your badge and gun." When Lyndon hesitated, he added, "Now, Deputy." With slow, deliberate movements, Lyndon unclipped her badge and removed her weapon. She placed them in Haskett's outstretched hand, her mind racing. This was happening too fast, the cover-up too smooth, like they'd done this before. "The dog, too," Haskett said. "County property." "No." The word came out before Lyndon could stop it. "RID 3 was assigned to me after Handler Boone's death. The paperwork is final." "Handler Boone," Ivy whispered. "They killed—" "That's enough," Haskett roared. He lunged forward and snatched the phone from Ivy's hands. The girl cried out in protest, but fell silent when he rounded on her. "One more word about Handler Boone, and I'll add interfering with a police investigation to your breaking and entering charges." 2 more deputies appeared in the doorway, summoned by the sirens. Haskett's demeanor shifted again, becoming official, almost fatherly. "Take Ms. McCrae into custody," he ordered, "and get the judge's statement. Deputy Price, you're dismissed. Leave the premises immediately." Lyndon watched helplessly as they led Ivy away, the girl's terrified eyes meeting hers one last time before she disappeared from view. Voss was already talking to the other deputy, his voice carrying clearly, describing how he'd been relaxing in his study when he heard noises, how shocked he'd been when Price had burst in making wild accusations. "I said leave," Haskett growled in her ear, "while you still can." The threat was clear in his voice. Lyndon whistled for Y3, and together they walked out of the mansion. The setting sun painted the lake blood red as they descended the steps. Her mind was already spinning, replaying every detail: the hidden room, Ivy's words, the way Haskett and Voss had worked in perfect sync to discredit them both. The drive home was a blur. Y3 sat alert in the passenger seat, his amber eyes fixed on her as if trying to communicate something important. When they finally reached her small rental house on the outskirts of town, Lyndon didn't bother turning on the lights. She sank onto her couch in the growing darkness, running through Ivy's accusations again and again. The community center fire. She remembered reading about it. The historic building had burned just weeks after a massive insurance policy update. And there had been others. The old mill, 3 lakefront properties, a storage facility. Each time, the properties had been bought cheap after the fires, redeveloped into luxury condos or tourist attractions. And Handler Boone, she'd never met him, but his death had seemed odd from the start. A skilled canine handler taking a curve too fast, his car bursting into flames before help could arrive. Y3 had been the only survivor, pulled from the wreckage with a badly burned shoulder. The shepherd whined softly, drawing her attention. He was staring at her intently, then turned to look at the blank wall of her living room, the same way he'd stared at that bookshelf in Voss's study. "What are you trying to tell me, boy?" Lyndon whispered. "What did you and Boone find?" Y3's only response was another low whine. But his unwavering gaze strengthened Lyndon's resolve. She might have lost her badge, but she hadn't lost her instincts, and every one of them was screaming that Haskett and Voss were covering up something much bigger than a few insurance scams. She thought of Ivy, alone and scared in a jail cell, of Handler Boone, who might have died trying to expose the truth, of Y3, who seemed to understand more than any dog should. "We're not letting this go," she told him firmly. "Badge or no badge, we're going to find out what really happened." Y3's tail wagged once in agreement, and in that moment, Lyndon knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever the cost to her career, she couldn't walk away, not when lives were at stake and justice needed to be served. Morning light filtered through Lyndon's kitchen window as she poured coffee into 2 mugs. Her hands shook slightly, betraying her exhaustion after a sleepless night. Across the small table, Reeves Talcott's weathered face showed nothing but focused attention as she recounted the events at Judge Voss's mansion. "A hidden room?" Reeves leaned forward, his paramedic's uniform creased from his overnight shift. "Behind a bookshelf? That's not just weird, that's criminal." "The girl was terrified," Lyndon said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "And the way Haskett swept in to silence her." She glanced at Y3, who lay alert by the door, ears pricked forward. "Something's not right." Reeves ran a hand through his graying black hair. "Those fires you mentioned, I was first response on 3 of them. The mill, the community center, the lakefront cabins. Something felt off each time, but we couldn't prove anything." "What do you mean, off?" "Accelerant patterns that didn't make sense. Response times that were too slow." His jaw tightened. "Lost a friend in the community center blaze. Tom Whelan. He swore he heard someone inside, went back in. The roof collapsed 5 minutes later. Lyndon watched his face carefully. Most people would have dismissed her story, but Reeves was different. Maybe it was the years of seeing tragedy up close, or maybe just his natural instinct for truth, but he believed her. "Why'd you come to me?" he asked suddenly. "Because you were there. You saw those fires firsthand." Lyndon hesitated. "And because you're not afraid to speak up, even when it costs you." Reeves nodded slowly. Everyone knew about his public criticism of the department's delayed response times. It had earned him enemies in high places, but he'd never backed down. "Well," he said, "you're right about one thing. This goes deeper than—" Y3's sudden bark cut him off. The shepherd was on his feet, hackles raised, staring at the window. Seconds later, Lyndon smelled it. Smoke. "Out! Now!" She grabbed her phone and car keys as Reeves yanked open the door. Thick black smoke was already pouring from beneath her trailer's skirting. They burst into the pre-dawn air, Y3 at their heels. The fire was spreading with unnatural speed, consuming the trailer's wooden steps and crawling up the walls. Reeves was already on his radio, calling it in, but Lyndon knew it would be too late. "Your car," he shouted, pointing to where she'd parked on the street. "Get Y3." An explosion rocked the ground. Glass shattered as the trailer's windows blew out. Y3 yelped as debris rained down, a piece of burning wood grazing his shoulder. Lyndon scooped him up, all 80 pounds of him, and ran for her vehicle, Reeves covering their retreat. They peeled away from the curb just as the first sirens wailed in the distance. In the rearview mirror, Lyndon watched her home become an inferno. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. "Head north," Reeves said grimly. "I know a place." The old ranger outpost stood alone on a forested ridge, its weather-beaten walls barely visible through the trees. Reeves led them up a narrow trail, explaining how he'd used it during fire seasons years ago. It had been abandoned when budget cuts closed this section of the park, but it was still solid, and more importantly, off the grid. Inside, dust covered everything. A bare cot, a metal desk, a few chairs, but it was secure, with good sight lines and multiple escape routes through the woods. While Reeves checked the perimeter, Lyndon examined Y3's shoulder. The burn was minor, but he favored that leg slightly. "You saved our lives, boy," she murmured, stroking his fur. He looked at her intently, then turned to stare at the desk. Something about its rectangular shape seemed to trigger the same fixation he'd shown at Voss's mansion. "The bookshelf," she whispered. "You're trying to tell me something about the bookshelf." "What about it?" Reeves asked, returning with an old first aid kit. Y3 keeps focusing on rectangular objects. First the shelf, now the desk. And back at Voss's, the books. They weren't arranged randomly. Some were stacked, others laid flat, almost like a pattern? Reeves settled beside her on the floor. Handler Boone was known for innovative training techniques. Maybe he taught Y3 to recognize specific configurations. "A code," Lyndon breathed, "hidden in plain sight." She pulled out her phone, grateful she'd thought to snap a quick photo of the bookshelf before everything went sideways. "Look at this. The vertical books could be ones, the horizontal books zeros. Binary code?" Reeves leaned closer, their shoulders touching. Boone was a tech guy before joining the force. This could be how he documented whatever he discovered. Y3 whined softly, his tail wagging once in what seemed like confirmation. Lyndon felt a surge of hope. They'd lost her home, but they'd gained something more valuable. A direction, a way to fight back. "We'll need help decoding this," she said. "Someone who understands binary, who we can trust." Reeves nodded. "I might know someone. Tech specialist at the hospital, helped us upgrade our emergency response systems. She's solid." Lyndon studied the photo again. Mind racing. Whatever handler Boone had discovered, it had cost him his life. Whatever message he'd hidden in that bookshelf, Voss and Haskett would kill to keep it secret. But with Y3's help, with Reeves beside her— "We need to be smart about this," Reeves said, reading her thoughts. "They just tried to burn you out. Next time they won't be so subtle." "I know." Lyndon reached for Y3, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "But we can't back down now. Too many people have died. Boone, your friend Tom, maybe others we don't know about. Someone has to stand up to them." "Well," Reeves said, his hand finding hers in the dimness, "you're not standing alone?" The touch anchored her, reminding her that even without her badge, she wasn't powerless. She had Y3's unwavering loyalty, Reeves's steady strength, and most importantly, the truth hidden in that mysterious pattern of books. It would have to be enough. Outside, dawn was breaking over the ridge, painting the forest in shades of gold. A new day, a new challenge, and somewhere in Judge Voss's mansion, a bookshelf held secrets that could bring down an empire of corruption, if they were brave enough, smart enough, and quick enough to decode them in time. The morning sun cast long shadows across Opal Redding's front porch as Lyndon climbed the worn wooden steps. Wind chimes tinkled softly, their gentle music a stark contrast to the tension knotting her shoulders. She'd left Y3 with Reeves at the ranger outpost, not wanting to draw attention to the retired librarian's home. The door opened before she could knock. Opal Redding stood in the entrance, silver hair neatly braided, reading glasses hanging from a delicate chain around her neck. Her sharp eyes took in Lyndon's exhausted appearance. "Deputy Price," she said quietly, "I've been expecting someone to come asking questions, though I thought it might be Judge Voss himself." She stepped aside, gesturing Lyndon in. "Come, we'll talk in my study." The house smelled of books and tea, with floor-to-ceiling shelves lining every wall. Opal led her through a maze of stacked volumes to a sunny room at the back. A large desk dominated the space, its surface covered in maps and old documents. "I worked as head librarian for 30 years, Opal explained, settling into a worn leather chair. "Including 15 years organizing Judge Voss's legal library. I knew something was wrong when they fired Tom Boone. He wasn't the kind to make mistakes." Lyndon pulled out her phone, hands slightly shaking. "I need your help with this." She showed Opal the photo of Voss's bookshelf. "The arrangement means something. My canine partner keeps focusing on it, but we can't crack the pattern." Opal slipped on her glasses, studying the image intently. Her expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. "Oh my," she breathed. "These aren't random at all. The vertical and horizontal placements, they're using the old county surveyor's code system." She pulled a weathered notebook from her desk drawer. Back in the 1950s, surveyors developed shorthand for marking property boundaries, vertical marks for latitude, horizontal for longitude. We used similar notation to catalog legal documents about land parcels. Lyndon leaned forward, heart racing. "Could you translate it?" "Give me a moment." Opal began making notes, muttering coordinates under her breath. After several minutes, she looked up, face pale. "These are all properties that burned in the last 18 months. Every single one." She spread out a county map, marking points as she went. "Here, the old Miller farm, the Whitman place, the abandoned strip mall on Route 12, all destroyed by supposed electrical fires or gas leaks." Lyndon's throat tightened as she watched the pattern emerge. "And what happened to those properties after the fires?" "They were sold at auction for pennies on the dollar." Opal's voice hardened. "All bought by Martel Crowder's development company." "Crowder!" Lyndon remembered the name from police reports. A wealthy landowner who'd been expanding his holdings rapidly. He's connected to Voss? They've known each other for decades. Opal pulled out old newspaper clippings. Voss helped Crowder win his first major property dispute back in 1998. They've been thick as thieves ever since. The pieces clicked into place. So Voss arranges the fires through corrupt officials, Crowder swoops in to buy the damaged properties cheap, and they both profit when he develops the land. And anyone who gets too close, Opal's voice trailed off, ends up dead or discredited, Lyndon finished grimly. Like Handler Boone. Tom knew. Opal's hands trembled slightly as she gathered the clippings. He came to me a week before he disappeared, asking about old property records. He'd noticed the pattern of fires but couldn't prove anything. Then he found something concrete. He was supposed to meet me here to discuss it, but he never showed. Lyndon thought of Ivy, terrified and hiding in that vault. He must have confronted Voss directly, got himself killed, but not before leaving this message in the bookshelf arrangement for his canine partner to find. Clever man. Opal smiled sadly. Using a system only old-timers would recognize. The question is, what will you do with this information? I need proof, documentation of the property transfers, anything showing the connection between Voss and Crowder. Lyndon's mind raced with possibilities. Would the library archives have copies? Better. Opal opened another drawer, pulling out a thick manila envelope. I've been keeping my own records. Every suspicious fire, every property sale, every connection I could document. I knew someday someone would need them. She handed the envelope to Lyndon. But be careful. These men have built their empire on other people's ashes. They won't hesitate to add you to the list. I've already lost my home, Lyndon said quietly. They burned my trailer last night, but they didn't get everything. She patted the phone in her pocket. And now we have a map of their crimes. Use my back door, Opal advised, leading her through the kitchen. And Deputy? Tom Boone was a good man. He deserved better than what they did to him. I know. Lyndon paused in the doorway. Thank you, Mrs. Redding, for keeping these records, for being brave enough to help. Sometimes bravery is just doing your job properly, Opal replied. Keeping accurate records, noticing patterns, speaking up when things don't add up. The rest is up to you. Lyndon slipped out into the morning sunshine, the envelope secure under her jacket. Each coordinate on that shelf represented someone's loss, someone's pain. But now they also represented hope, proof of a conspiracy that had destroyed lives and corrupted justice itself. She thought of Y3, still fixated on that bookshelf pattern even after all these months. His former handler had left them a map, written in the language of surveyor's codes and careful book placement. Now it was up to them to follow it to the truth, no matter how dangerous the path might be. The morning breeze carried the scent of smoke. Someone's breakfast fire, probably, but it made her shiver anyway. She quickened her pace, eager to return to Reeves and Y3 with their breakthrough. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of greed and murder that stretched across the county like a spider's web. And at its center sat Judge Harlan Voss, spinning his schemes from behind a carefully arranged bookshelf that had finally revealed its secrets. Lyndon's fingers drummed against the steering wheel as she watched the old Johnson farm through binoculars. The abandoned farmhouse sat a quarter-mile back from the road, its weathered boards glowing golden in the late afternoon sun. The perfect safe house, remote enough for privacy but close enough to town for quick access if needed. "You're sure this place is secure?" Ivy asked from the back seat, her voice still carrying that edge of tension she couldn't quite shake. "Positive," Reeves answered before Lyndon could. "My uncle willed it to me years ago. Nobody stepped foot here in months except to check the generator." Lyndon lowered the binoculars, satisfied they hadn't been followed. There's only one access road. Good sight lines in all directions, and backup power if we need it. You'll be safe here with Reeves while I meet with the state investigator. They led Ivy inside, Y3 padding vigilantly at their heels. The interior was dusty but solid. Worn furniture draped in sheets, a working kitchen, 3 bedrooms upstairs. Reeves had already stocked it with supplies, food, water, basic medical supplies. I know it's not much, he said, pulling sheets off the furniture. But it beats that vault. Ivy managed a small smile, the first Lyndon had seen from her. It's perfect, thank you both, for believing me. Get some rest, Lyndon told her gently. Reeves will stay with you. I need to meet my contact. Outside, Reeves followed her to the car. You trust this state investigator? Lupe Caro? Yes. We worked together years ago when I was still MP. She's straight as they come. Lyndon pulled out her phone, checking the video file she'd compiled. Between Ivy's testimony and what we found at Opal's, we've got enough to at least get a warrant. Be careful, Reeves said quietly. These people have already tried to kill you once. Lyndon met his concerned gaze. That's why I'm counting on you to keep Ivy safe. If anything happens to me, don't. He gripped her shoulder. Just come back, okay? She nodded, unable to find words for the warmth his touch sparked. Then she was driving away, watching him grow smaller in her rearview mirror. The meeting point was a truck stop 30 miles outside county lines. Lyndon spotted Investigator Caro's unmarked car in the back lot, deliberately positioned between 2 semi-trucks. Smart, the trucker's presence would mask any surveillance. Lupe Caro hadn't changed much in 5 years, still rail-thin and sharp-featured, with shrewd, dark eyes that missed nothing. She was examining something on her laptop when Lyndon slid into the passenger seat. You look like hell, Price. Nice to see you too, Lupe. Losing your home will do that. Caro's expression softened slightly. I heard about the fire. You okay? I'm fine. Did you review what I sent? Caro nodded, turning her laptop so Lyndon could see. The video from Ivy's phone is damning. Clear footage of Voss threatening her, mentioning the fires. And these property records your librarian friend compiled, they establish a clear pattern. But we need more. What kind of more? Direct evidence linking Voss and Crowder to the actual crimes. Bank records showing illegal payments, documentation of the scheme itself. Caro's fingers tapped the steering wheel. Right now we can prove they profited from the fires, but not that they caused them. Lyndon leaned back, thinking. Crowder keeps detailed records of everything. He's obsessive about it. There was a whole article in the business section about his meticulous accounting practices. And you think he documented the illegal payments too? He would have had to keep track of kickbacks, payoffs, property transfers. The question is where he keeps those records. Caro was already pulling up satellite imagery on her laptop. What about his quarry office? It's isolated, private property. Perfect place to hide evidence, Lyndon finished. But we'd need probable cause for a warrant. A slow smile spread across Caro's face. Or we could give him a reason to bring the evidence to us. The plan came together quickly. Caro would pose as a wealthy out-of-state investor interested in acquiring several properties, including ones they knew were next on the arson list. The meeting would be at Crowder's quarry office, where he kept all his records. Y3 can do a security sweep before the meeting, Lyndon suggested. Standard procedure when a VIP visits. If he happens to alert on any suspicious documents. Instant probable cause, Caro agreed. I'll have a tactical team standing by out of sight. You focus on getting that dog to find what we need. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Caro's team created an impeccable cover identity, complete with business cards and a website for her fictional investment firm. Lyndon worked with Y3, rehearsing search patterns that would lead naturally to wherever Crowder might store incriminating documents. The morning of the operation dawned clear and cool. Lyndon arrived at the quarry early, Y3 alert beside her. "Standard security sweep," she told the secretary. "Protocol for Ms. Caro's visit." She worked methodically through the building, letting Y3 check each room while she noted security camera placement and potential exits. In Crowder's private office, the dog's behavior shifted subtly. Head high, nose working, tail straight. "What is it, boy?" she murmured. "Show me." Y3 moved to a filing cabinet, pawing at the bottom drawer. When Lyndon opened it, she found exactly what they needed. Ledgers filled with detailed records of payments to Voss, Haskett, and others, carefully coded but clear enough to anyone who knew what to look for. She called it in quietly. "Package located. Proceed with operation." An hour later, Caro arrived in a sleek black SUV, dressed every inch the successful investor. Crowder met her in the parking lot, all smiles and Western charm in his tailored ranch wear. Neither noticed the tactical teams moving into position. The meeting proceeded exactly as planned. Crowder, eager to impress, began pulling out documentation to show the scope of his operations. And there, mixed in with the legitimate papers, were the damning ledgers Y3 had found. "Martel Crowder," Caro said calmly, drawing her badge instead of a checkbook. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, fraud, and murder." The look of shock on his face was almost comical. Then Sheriff Haskett burst in. He must have been nearby, monitoring. His hand went to his weapon, but state officers were already moving in from all sides. "Don't," Lyndon advised quietly. "It's over." For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then Haskett's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him as officers moved in to take both men into custody. Lyndon watched them being led away in handcuffs, feeling a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and a bone-deep weariness. They'd struck a major blow against the conspiracy, but she knew Voss was still out there. The judge was too clever to be caught in this net. Still, it was a victory. When she called Reeves to report their success, she could hear Ivy crying with relief in the background. "You did it," Reeves said softly. "You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected him. "All of us together." She looked at Y3, who sat watching her with those knowing amber eyes. "And we're not done yet." But for now, she let herself savor this moment, watching Crowder and Haskett being driven away, their power broken, their schemes exposed to the light of day. Sometimes justice came slowly, but it came all the same. "Good boy," she told Y3, scratching behind his ears. He leaned into her touch, tail wagging slightly. Together they'd honored Handler Boone's final message, hidden so cleverly in that bookshelf. Together they'd started to make things right. Caro approached, tucking away her phone. "State police are securing the building and all records. We'll need your statement, but it can wait until tomorrow." She smiled slightly. "Go get some rest, Price. You've earned it." Lyndon nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from doing what was right, no matter the cost. She'd lost her home and risked her career, but she'd kept her integrity. In the end, that was what mattered most. The victory was short-lived. Within 48 hours, Judge Harlan Voss demonstrated exactly why he'd held power for so long in Cedar County. Lyndon was reviewing case notes with investigator Caro when the news broke. The county clerk burst into the conference room, face flushed. "They've voided the arrests," she blurted out. "Judge Voss just issued an emergency ruling." Caro snatched the papers, her expression darkening as she read. "He's claiming the entire operation was illegal. No probable cause for the search." She looked up at Lyndon. "He's saying you planted evidence." Lyndon's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. We had everything documented." "Voss is arguing that since you were suspended, you had no authority to conduct the search. Everything stemming from it is fruit of the poisoned tree." Caro's voice was tight with controlled anger. "He's also claiming you stole confidential documents from his home during your initial welfare check." Y3, sensing the tension, pressed against Lyndon's leg. She scratched his ears absently, mind racing. "What about Ivy's testimony?" "There is no Ivy McCrae in the system anymore. All records of her discovery have been sealed or altered." Caro's phone buzzed. She checked it and swore softly. "They're issuing a warrant for your arrest. Fabrication of evidence, theft of confidential materials, criminal trespass." "They can't do this," Lyndon protested, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Of course they could. This was exactly what Ivy had tried to warn her about. A system so thoroughly corrupted that truth itself could be rewritten. "You need to go," Caro said quietly. "Now. I'll try to fight this through proper channels, but Voss has too many connections. He's already gotten the state investigation suspended pending review." Lyndon grabbed her jacket and whistled for Y3. "What about Reeves and Ivy?" "I'll warn them. Just get somewhere safe." But she was already too late. As Lyndon pulled into the parking lot of her temporary apartment, she spotted 2 sheriff's cruisers. Deputies were leading Reeves out in handcuffs. Her first instinct was to intervene, but training and bitter experience held her back. She couldn't help him if she was arrested too. Instead, she watched helplessly as they pushed him into a cruiser, his face set in grim lines. Y3 whined softly from the back seat. Lyndon put the car in reverse and eased away before anyone spotted them. Her mind raced through options. Who could she trust? Where could she go that Voss's influence couldn't reach? Her phone rang. Caro again. "Ivy's gone," the investigator reported tersely. "Slipped out of the safe house sometime in the last hour. Left a note saying she can't testify. She's too scared they'll blame everything on her. Can't say I blame her, given what Voss is capable of." Lyndon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Everything was unraveling. All their careful work, all their evidence, swept away by a few strokes of a corrupt judge's pen. She'd known Voss was powerful, but this was like watching democracy itself crumble. "They're setting up roadblocks," Caro continued. "County lines, major highways. You need to ditch your car and phone. I'll try to buy you some time, but—" "I understand." Lyndon ended the call and pulled into a busy shopping center. She had emergency supplies in the trunk: cash, burner phone, basic survival gear. Old habits from her military police days that suddenly seemed prescient. Y3 watched intently as she transferred essential items to a backpack. "Looks like we're going off the grid, boy," she told him softly. "You up for that?" His tail wagged once, steady, serious. She smiled, despite everything. At least she wasn't completely alone. They walked away from the car, just another woman and her dog out for a stroll, but Lyndon's mind was churning. She needed somewhere to regroup, somewhere to think, somewhere Voss wouldn't think to look. The old ranger station was compromised. It would be one of the first places they'd check. Her burned-out trailer was under surveillance. That left. She pulled out the burner phone and dialed one of the few numbers she'd memorized. "Opal? It's Lyndon. I need help." The retired librarian didn't hesitate. "Come to the back door, and bring that clever dog of yours." They walked for hours, taking a circuitous route through residential neighborhoods and parkland. Lyndon kept Y3 close, aware that his distinctive appearance could give them away. As darkness fell, they finally reached Opal's modest house on the outskirts of town. The old woman ushered them inside quickly. "I've been watching the news," she said, leading them to a cozy basement room lined with books. "That snake Voss is spinning quite a tale about you." "He's trying to bury the truth," Lyndon said wearily, sinking into an armchair. "And he's doing a damn good job of it." "Language, dear," Opal chided automatically, then smiled. "Though in this case, I suppose it's warranted. Are you hungry?" Lyndon started to refuse, but her stomach growled traitorously. Opal disappeared upstairs and returned with sandwiches and water for both Lyndon and Y3. As they ate, Opal filled her in on the local reaction. Opinion was divided. Some believed Voss's claims that Lyndon was a rogue officer pursuing a vendetta, while others remembered too many suspicious fires and convenient land deals to accept the official story. "Reeves was released an hour ago," Opal reported, checking her phone. "They're calling it a routine questioning, but people saw him being arrested. Word spreads." "They're trying to intimidate anyone who might support me," Lyndon said. "Classic tactics. Show of force followed by a seemingly reasonable retreat. Makes the next target think twice." "What will you do now?" Lyndon looked at Y3, who had settled into a watchful rest position by the door. "I don't know," she admitted. "Voss has outmaneuvered us at every turn. He's turned the very system I sworn to uphold against me." "Perhaps that's your answer," Opal said thoughtfully. "You've been trying to fight him within the system, but sometimes, when the system itself is corrupted." "We have to find another way," Lyndon finished. She straightened, feeling the first stirrings of a plan. "Opal, those property records you helped me decode, do you still have copies?" "Of course. A good librarian never throws away important documents." Opal's eyes twinkled. "Even ones that technically don't exist anymore." "Good, because I think it's time we stopped playing by Voss's rules." Lyndon looked at Y3, remembering how his strange behavior had started this whole journey. "We need to go back to the beginning. Back to what Handler Boone was trying to tell us through those books." Y3's ears pricked up at Boone's name. He rose and padded over to press against her leg, as if lending his strength to her resolve. Opal watched them with knowing eyes. "You'll stay here tonight," she said firmly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we can start untangling this web properly." Lyndon wanted to argue, to start working immediately, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She nodded gratefully and settled deeper into the chair, one hand resting on Y3's head. Outside, she could hear sirens in the distance. The hunt for her was still ongoing. But here in this basement sanctuary, surrounded by books and loyalty, she felt the first faint stirrings of hope. Voss might control the courts and the police, but he couldn't control the truth forever. She just had to find a way to make that truth impossible to ignore. The basement's fluorescent lights hummed softly as Lyndon spread out the documents on Opal's worn oak table. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she couldn't rest. Not now. Not when they might finally be onto something. "These were in the reference section," Opal said, setting down another stack of folders. "County training records from 2018 through 2020, including the K9 unit protocols." Lyndon's hands stilled over the papers. "Handler Boone's time frame." "Indeed." Opal adjusted her reading glasses. Merritt Boone was meticulous about his documentation. Every patrol route, every training session with Year 3, it's all here. Year 3 lifted his head at the mention of his formal designation, ears pricking forward. He'd been lying quietly in the corner, but now he padded over to the table, nose twitching with interest. "Look at this." Lyndon pulled out a map marked with highlighted routes. Boone had specific patterns for different types of searches. He'd use rectangles for building searches, triangles for open areas. Rather like the arrangement of those books on the judge's shelf, Opal mused. She retrieved their earlier notes about the shelf cipher. The way the volumes were grouped, it wasn't random at all. Lyndon's pulse quickened. Can you overlay the patterns? Opal carefully traced the book arrangement onto translucent paper, then laid it over Boone's patrol map. The shapes aligned perfectly. My God, Lyndon breathed. He wasn't just marking properties targeted for arson. He was leaving breadcrumbs, using his own search patterns as a key to the code. Year 3 whined softly, pawing at one of the folders. Lyndon opened it to find training logs in Boone's precise handwriting. Each entry detailed Year 3's progress, including specific commands and behaviors. Wait. Lyndon sat up straighter. That day in Voss's study, Year 3 wasn't just alerting to Ivy. He was following an old command pattern. Look. She pointed to an entry. Boone trained him to respond to certain book arrangements as directional markers. The shelf itself was a message. Opal leaned closer, squinting at the page. Clever man. He must have known something was wrong, suspected he might not survive to expose it directly. So he left the evidence where only another K9 handler would find it. Lyndon felt a mix of admiration and grief, and made sure Year 3 would recognize the signal. A soft chime from Opal's computer interrupted them. The elderly librarian peered at the screen, then gasped. Lyndon, look at this. It was an automatically generated email notification. Scheduled upload complete. Attached was a video file. It's from Ivy's cloud account, Opal explained. She must have set it to release if she didn't check in for a certain period. Lyndon's hands shook slightly as she clicked play. The footage was grainy, clearly shot on a phone hidden in someone's pocket. But the audio was crystal clear. You can't keep doing this, Judge. Merritt Boone's voice, tight with controlled anger. People are dying in these fires. People die all the time. Handler Boone. Voss's familiar cultured tones sent a chill down Lyndon's spine. Sometimes for the greater good of the community. Greater good? You're burning out low-income residents so your developer friends can snap up the land? Progress requires sacrifice. Surely a military man understands that concept. This isn't progress. It's greed wrapped in bureaucracy, and I'm going to prove it. A heavy sigh from Voss. That would be extremely unwise. Think of your family, your career. Are you threatening me? Merely pointing out that accidents happen, especially in dangerous lines of work like yours. The video ended abruptly. Lyndon sat back, stunned. This was recorded right before Boone's accident during a training exercise. He knew. Opal's voice was soft. He knew they would come for him, so he built this trail of breadcrumbs, the book arrangement in Voss's study, Year 3's training, this video set to upload. All pieces of the puzzle. Year 3 pressed against Lyndon's leg, his warm presence anchoring her as implications spun through her mind. Boone didn't just die in an accident. He was murdered because he discovered the truth about the arsons. And now you've discovered it too. Opal's concerned gaze met hers. You must be very careful, dear. Lyndon scratched behind Year 3's ears, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Boone did everything he could to make sure the truth would come out. We owe it to him to finish what he started. She began gathering the documents, mind racing. We need to get these records somewhere safe. Make copies. Find a way to... A sharp bark from Year 3 cut her off. The German Shepherd was staring intently at the basement window. Moments later, they heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Company, Lyndon muttered, quickly stuffing the papers into a waterproof messenger bag. Opal, If anyone asks, I'm just a foolish old woman who loves to talk about the good old days of the library, Opal finished with a wink. The back gate's unlocked. Go. Lyndon hugged the older woman briefly, then slipped out through the basement's exterior door, Year 3 moving silently beside her. As they melted into the pre-dawn shadows, she heard Opal's voice cheerfully greeting whoever had arrived. They made their way through back alleys and side streets, the precious document secure in Lyndon's bag. Her mind kept returning to the video, to Boone's voice confronting evil in his steady, principled way. He'd known the risks, but stood his ground anyway. Year 3 stayed close, occasionally glancing up at her as if to say, I remember him too. We'll make it right, boy, she whispered. For Boone, for Ivy, for everyone they've hurt. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky as they found temporary shelter in an abandoned storage unit. Lyndon spread out the documents again, looking for anything they might have missed. Year 3 settled into his guard position, ever vigilant. She had the evidence. Now, Boone's careful documentation, the video confession, the property records. The question was how to use it in a way Voss couldn't bury or discredit. The judge had already proven he could manipulate the legal system to his advantage. Year 3's ears suddenly pricked forward. He rose smoothly, head cocked toward the door, but his posture was alert rather than alarmed. Footsteps approached. A familiar voice called softly, Lyndon, it's Reeves. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Clear, she responded. The paramedic slipped inside, looking rumpled but determined. Opal sent me. Said you found something big. You could say that. Lyndon gestured to the spread of documents. Handler Boone left us a trail, and Ivy left us proof. As she filled him in, Reeves's expression grew increasingly grim. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. So what's the play? He finally asked. We can't take this to the authorities. Voss has too much influence. No, Lyndon agreed. We need to think bigger, more public. She looked at Year 3, remembering how his training had led them to Ivy, to the code, to the truth. And I think I know where to start. The abandoned storage unit felt smaller as evening approached. Lyndon sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, gently examining Year 3's injured paw. The German Shepherd had been favoring it since their escape from the burning trailer, though he never complained. Almost done, boy. She carefully wrapped the bandage, making sure it wasn't too tight. There you go, good as new. Year 3 licked her hand in thanks, his amber eyes wise and patient, just like Boone had trained him to be. The door creaked open, and Reeves slipped inside. His clothes were dirty and torn, his face showing fresh scratches, but his eyes held fierce determination. You look awful, Lyndon said, rising to meet him. You should see the other guys. He managed a tired grin. Haskett's deputies aren't as tough as they think. Lost them in Miller's Creek. Lyndon pulled out the last coordinate they'd decoded. The final location from Boone's pattern. It's Voss's hunting lodge up in Bear Creek Valley. Makes sense. Reeves nodded. Remote, private, perfect place to keep sensitive documents. Or evidence of murder, Lyndon added quietly. They spread out a topographical map on an old crate. The hunting lodge sat isolated on a ridge, surrounded by dense forest. One access road, no neighbors for miles. Security? Reeves asked. Motion sensors, cameras, but the power runs on a separate grid. Lyndon traced the utility lines. Cut that. We're in darkness. When do we move? Tonight. New moon. They won't expect... A soft knock interrupted them. Year 3's ears pricked forward, but he didn't growl. A good sign. Lyndon drew her backup weapon anyway as she approached the door. "Who is it?" "It's me," Ivy's voice, barely above a whisper. "Please let me help." Lyndon opened the door. Ivy stood there, looking small and scared, but her chin was set with determination. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "You should be somewhere safe," Lyndon said gently. "Nowhere's safe while they're free." Ivy's voice shook slightly. "I ran when things got bad. I shouldn't have. Handler Boone never ran, and look what they did to him. I need to make it right." Reeves and Lyndon exchanged glances. They both recognized the steel beneath the girl's fear. "Okay," Lyndon said finally, "but you stay in the car as backup. First sign of trouble, you drive straight to State Investigator Caro. Understood?" Ivy nodded firmly. They spent the next few hours planning. Reeves knew the backcountry roads. Ivy remembered details about the lodge's layout from overheard conversations. Year 3 seemed to grow more alert as night approached, as if he sensed the importance of what lay ahead. "Boone knew what he was doing," Lyndon said, studying the dog's focused expression. "Everything he trained into Year 3, the book recognition, the search patterns, it was all leading to this moment." "He was a good man," Reeves said quietly. "Deserved better than what they did to him." "Then let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." As darkness fell, they loaded their gear into Reeves's battered pickup. Year 3 settled in the back seat next to Ivy, his presence clearly comforting the girl. The night air was thick with the promise of rain, perfect cover for what lay ahead. Lyndon checked her weapon one last time, then climbed into the passenger seat. Her fear had transformed into something harder, more focused. This wasn't just about saving her career anymore. This was about justice, for Boone, for Ivy, for everyone Voss and his cronies had hurt. "Ready?" Reeves asked, starting the engine. She nodded. "Let's finish what Boone started?" They took back roads, headlights off once they left the highway. The pickup's tires crunched softly on gravel as they wound deeper into the hills. Year 3 sat alert, watching the darkness flow past. Occasionally, his ears would twitch at some night sound, but he remained calm, another sign of Boone's excellent training. Ivy huddled in her seat, arms wrapped around herself, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "There's a service road about half a mile before the main gate. Maintenance crews use it." "Good intel," Lyndon said. "That's our way in." They parked the truck in a grove of pines, well hidden from the road. The air smelled of rain and cedar, perfect conditions for staying undetected. "Remember the plan," Lyndon told Ivy. "Any sign of trouble?" "Straight to Investigator Caro," Ivy finished. "I won't let you down." "You already haven't." Lyndon squeezed the girl's shoulder. "Stay safe." She and Reeves moved out, Year 3 ghosting between them. The dog's injured paw didn't seem to bother him now. He was all business, just as Boone had trained him to be. They found the utility pole exactly where their map showed it. Reeves made quick work of the connections while Lyndon kept watch. Moments later, the distant lights of the lodge winked out. "Clock's ticking," Reeves whispered. "Security systems on backup power now." They moved upslope through the trees, using the darkness for cover. Year 3 led the way, his night vision far superior to theirs. Twice he froze, warning them of patrol routes before they could blunder into them. The lodge loomed ahead, a darker shape against the clouded sky. No lights showed inside. Their blackout was holding. But they could hear generators humming, keeping essential systems online. "Back entrance," Lyndon breathed. "Year 3, find it." The German shepherd moved forward confidently, leading them to a service door partly hidden by overgrown shrubs. The lock yielded to Reeves's picks after a tense minute of work. Inside, emergency lights cast weird shadows through the halls. Year Three's nails clicked softly on hardwood as he led them deeper into the lodge. His training was evident in every silent pause, every careful advance. They found Voss's private office on the second floor. More locked doors, more precious minutes spent defeating them. But finally they were in. "Start searching," Linden ordered. "Anything that links Voss to the fires or Boone's death." They worked methodically, using red-filtered flashlights to preserve their night vision. File cabinets yielded nothing but routine papers. The computer was encrypted. But then... Here. Reeves's voice was tight with excitement. He'd found a hidden panel behind a painting, a small safe built into the wall. Year Three's ears pricked forward. He gave a soft whine, the same sound he'd made at the bookshelf where they'd found Ivy. "Good boy," Linden whispered. "You knew all along, didn't you? Boone showed you where to look." The safe took precious minutes to crack. Inside, they found exactly what they needed: documentation of bribes, surveillance photos of Boone, records of properties targeted for arson, and most damning of all, a recording of Voss himself ordering Boone's death. "This is it," Linden breathed. "This is everything we need." A floorboard creaked behind them. "I'm afraid I can't let you leave with that," Judge Voss said softly. "Drop your weapon, Judge," Reeves growled, stepping in front of Linden. But Voss wasn't alone. Sheriff Haskett emerged from the shadows, his service pistol already drawn. "You two just can't leave well enough alone, can you?" Year Three's hackles rose, a low growl building in his throat. The tension in the room crackled like electricity before a storm. Suddenly, Year Three's head snapped toward another bookshelf across the room. His bark echoed sharply off the walls, the same urgent pattern they'd heard at Voss's house when they found Ivy. "Shut that mud up!" Haskett snarled, but Year Three was already in motion, scratching frantically at the base of the shelf. Linden's instincts kicked in. Whatever Year Three had found, it was important enough to risk everything for. She dove toward the shelf, using the motion to throw off Haskett's aim. The sheriff's shot went wide, splintering wood above her head. Reeves tackled Haskett while Linden reached the bookshelf. Her fingers found the hidden catch, similar to the one at Voss's house. The shelf swung away to reveal a steel safe embedded in the wall. But something was wrong. Wires snaked from its seams, connected to a crude device with a blinking red light. "It's rigged!" she shouted, recognizing the setup from her military training. A smoke charge, meant to destroy evidence if the safe was breached incorrectly. "Step away from there," Voss commanded, his cultured voice cracking with panic. But Linden was already studying the wires, trying to determine which to cut. Red or green, the wrong choice would trigger the charge. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she traced the connections. Behind her, the sounds of struggle continued. A grunt of pain from Reeves, the thud of bodies hitting furniture, Year Three's warning barks. She made her choice, reached for the green wire. "No!" Voss lunged forward. Too late, the device activated with a sharp hiss. Dense gray smoke began pouring from the safe's seams, filling the room with choking fumes. Heat radiated from the metal as documents inside began to burn. "Everyone out!" Reeves shouted. "The whole place could go up!" Linden tried to reach into the safe, but the heat drove her back. Smoke burned her eyes and throat. Through watering vision, she saw flames beginning to lick at the wooden walls. The building's old timber groaned ominously above them. The fire was spreading faster than it should, following some hidden accelerant. Of course, Voss would have prepared for this. Probably planned to burn the lodge himself once he'd cleaned out the evidence. Year Three barked urgently, tugging at her sleeve. The dog's training was kicking in. Get his handler to safety. "The ledger!" she coughed. "We can't leave without..." A thunderous crack split the air. Part of the ceiling collapsed in a shower of burning debris, blocking their exit. The heat was becoming unbearable. "Lyndon," Reeves appeared through the smoke, his face streaked with soot. "We have to go, now!" She could barely see through the thickening smoke. Voss and Haskett had already fled, leaving them trapped. The room was becoming an inferno. More creaking from above, the whole roof was starting to give way. Year 3 whined, pressing against her legs. The dog's survival instincts were warring with his training to stay with his handler. "The window!" Reeves shouted over the roar of the flames. "It's our only shot." They stumbled toward the faint outline of the window, choking on toxic smoke. The glass was too thick to break easily. Reeves grabbed a chair, smashed it against the pane once, twice, 3 times before it finally shattered. Cool night air rushed in, feeding the flames but giving them a precious chance to breathe. Below, a sloped section of roof offered a possible escape route. The ceiling gave another warning groan. Burning splinters rained down around them. "Go!" Lyndon pushed Year 3 toward the window. The dog hesitated, then leaped through, landing gracefully on the roof below. Reeves helped her climb out next. The metal was hot under her hands, but better than the inferno behind them. They scrambled down the slope as fast as they dared, the rough shingles tearing at their clothes and skin. Behind them, the room where they'd been standing collapsed with a thunderous roar. Flames shot skyward, illuminating the night like a beacon. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. They reached the edge of the roof. It was still a 12-foot drop to the ground, but there was no time to look for a better option. The fire was spreading rapidly through the old building. "Roll when you land," Reeves shouted, then pushed off. He hit the ground hard, but managed to turn it into a shoulder roll that absorbed some of the impact. Year 3 followed, his powerful legs easily handling the drop. Lyndon took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and jumped. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. Pain shot through her ankle as she rolled across the damp grass. But she was alive. They were all alive. They retreated to the tree line, watching as the hunting lodge became a towering inferno. The ledger and all its evidence were surely destroyed. But they had survived, and sometimes, Lyndon knew, that had to be enough. The crunch of tires on gravel cut through the night. Haskett's deputies were arriving, their patrol lights painting the trees in strobing red and blue. Lyndon's heart pounded as she counted at least 4 vehicles surrounding the burning lodge. "Hands where we can see them!" Haskett's voice boomed through a megaphone. "We've got the place surrounded!" Reeves squeezed Lyndon's arm. "There's a crawl space under the east side. Get Ivy and Year 3 down there while I distract them." "No," she whispered fiercely. "They'll kill you." "They need someone to blame. Better me than all of us." Before she could stop him, Reeves broke cover and stepped into the open, hands raised. "Looking for me, Sheriff?" Flashlight beams converged on him. Deputies rushed forward, roughly forcing him to his knees. Lyndon fought back tears as they cuffed him, knowing his sacrifice bought precious seconds. "Ivy," she breathed, turning to the terrified girl. "Under the floor, now." They scrambled to a loose board near the foundation. Year 3 followed silently, his training kicking in. The space beneath was tight and dank, but it would hide them from searching deputies. Lyndon helped Ivy slide into the darkness, then guided Year 3 down beside her. "Stay absolutely quiet," she whispered. "No matter what happens." The girl's fingers clutched her sleeve. "Don't leave us." "I'll lead them away. Trust me." Lyndon pressed Boone's folded map into Ivy's hand. "If anything happens, follow this to the old pier. Year 3 knows the way." Haskett's voice grew closer. price. Last chance to surrender." Lyndon replaced the floorboard and stood, mind racing. The pier map had shown an electrical junction box near the lodge's rear corner. If she could reach it. "I'm coming out," she called, stepping into view with raised hands. "Don't hurt Reeves. He was just following my orders." Haskett's smirk was visible in the firelight as deputies surrounded her. "Noble to the end. Where's the girl?" "Gone. Like your chance to hide what you did to Boone." The sheriff's face darkened. "Search the building. Find her." As deputies rushed past, Lyndon tensed. The junction box was 10 feet away. If she could just... "On your knees," Haskett ordered, weapon trained on her chest. Instead, she dove for the box. Bullets sparked off metal as she ripped open the panel and yanked the main line free. Darkness crashed down as the lodge's exterior lights died. Chaos erupted. Deputies shouted in confusion. Flashlight beams swept wildly. Taking advantage of the disorder, Lyndon rolled beneath the porch and army crawled to the loose board. "Ivy," she whispered urgently. "Time to move." The girl in year 3 emerged silently. Together they crept through the shadows while voices rang out behind them. The dock lay ahead, barely visible in the flame-lit darkness. "Over there!" A deputy spotted them. More gunshots split the night. Lyndon pushed Ivy forward. "Run! Don't stop!" They sprinted for the water as bullets kicked up splinters around them. The old dock creaked beneath their feet. Behind them, the lodge had become an inferno, its flames reaching hungrily for the sky. Year 3 led the way, remembering Boone's training path. Ivy stumbled but kept going, clutching the map. Lyndon brought up the rear, hoping her surrender had bought them enough time to escape. The water ahead promised safety in its darkness. If they could just reach the end of the pier. The dock shuddered as more feet pounded the weathered boards. Haskett's enraged voice carried over the crackling flames. "Don't let them get away!" Thunder rolled across the lake as they reached the dock's far end. The wooden planks swayed beneath their feet, weathered boards groaning with each step. Year 3's ears pricked up just as a familiar voice cut through the darkness. "Going somewhere?" Judge Voss stepped out from behind a storage shed, his silver hair gleaming in the fire's glow. In one hand, he gripped a leather-bound ledger. In the other, a polished revolver pointed steadily at them. Lyndon instinctively moved to shield Ivy, but Voss's next words froze her. "Miss McCrae, come here." His commanding tone, the same one that had ruled his courtroom for decades, made Ivy flinch. "Don't," Lyndon warned, but Voss pressed the gun's barrel against the ledger. "This evidence dies with me unless she complies. Now, girl." Ivy took a trembling step forward. The dock creaked ominously beneath them as distant lightning illuminated the scene in stark flashes. Lyndon's hand brushed her body cam, ensuring it was still recording through Reeves's emergency uplink. "All this drama over a few profitable fires," Voss said, backing Ivy toward the dock's edge. "You should have stayed quiet in that vault, child. Sometimes justice requires unfortunate sacrifices." "Like Boone?" Lyndon's voice carried over the growing wind. "Was he an unfortunate sacrifice when he discovered your scheme?" The judge's composed mask cracked slightly. "Boone was a fool who couldn't see the bigger picture. This county needed development. Progress has its price." "Progress?" Ivy found her voice, though it shook. "You killed people, destroyed homes." "I created opportunity," Voss shouted, his cultured facade crumbling. "Every fire cleared the way for something better. Haskett handled the investigations, Crowder bought the land, and I made sure the legal side stayed clean. It was perfect." A deafening crack split the air as lightning struck a nearby tree. The dock's ancient supports, weakened by years of neglect, finally gave way. Wooden beams splintered like gunshots as sections of planking collapsed into the churning water. Voss stumbled, the ledger flying from his grip. His free hand caught a dangling rope as he fell, leaving him suspended above the waves. The gun clattered onto a remaining section of dock near Ivy's feet. "Help me!" he cried, his commanding tone replaced by raw panic. "Please, I'll confess everything. The arsons, the bribes, Boone's murder, all of it." Lyndon lunged forward, grabbing Ivy's arm just as the boards beneath her feet began to give way. She hauled the girl to safety while Year 3 barked urgently from solid ground. "The ledger!" Voss pleaded, his grip slipping. "It has every transaction, every partner's name. Save it and me. I'll testify against them all." "Like you testified against Boone?" Ivy's voice was steel now. "Left him to die in one of your fires?" Yes, I ordered it." Voss's words tumbled out in desperate confession. "Haskett staged it like an accident. The fool was going to expose everything. I couldn't let him ruin what we'd built." Another support beam cracked. Voss's rope dropped lower, his feet now touching the violent water. "Price, you took an oath to protect. Help me." Lyndon stared down at him, her bodycam's red light blinking steadily. "So did you, Your Honor. I'm just keeping mine." The rope snapped. Voss's scream was cut short as he plunged into the dark water. Lyndon spotted him surface once, gasping, before the current swept him toward the far shore where Haskett's deputies waited. The ledger floated nearby, its pages spreading like broken wings on the water's surface. But its contents no longer mattered. Voss's confession, captured clearly on her streaming bodycam, would be all the evidence they needed. Year 3's bark drew their attention as more voices approached through the rain. But these shouts were different, organized, professional. State police units were arriving, summoned by Reeves's emergency signal. The fire behind them cast one final glow across the lake as the storm broke in full fury. Lightning revealed Voss being pulled from the water, his pristine suit now a sodden mess, his authority washed away by his own desperate words. Voss's fingers finally slipped free, his body plummeting into the churning lake below. The splash echoed across the water as lightning illuminated his struggling form in the shallows. His expensive suit dragged him down, but the water was shallow enough for him to stand, sputtering and gasping. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the shoreline. State troopers emerged from the tree line, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. 2 officers quickly freed Reeves from his restraints, while others surrounded Sheriff Haskett, forcing him to his knees despite his angry protests. "On the ground. Hands where we can see them." The commands rang out sharp and clear. Lyndon's legs gave out as the adrenaline drained from her body. She sank to what remained of the dock, drawing shaky breaths. Year 3 limped toward her, favoring his injured paw but carrying something in his jaws, the oilskin-wrapped ledger, somehow retrieved from where it had fallen. "Good boy," she whispered, taking the precious evidence from his mouth. The dog pressed against her side, offering warmth and support as they watched justice unfold below. State troopers were already reading Voss his rights as they pulled him, dripping and defeated from the lake's edge. The truth had finally surfaced, not just in confessions and evidence, but in the undeniable reality of corrupt men brought low by their own actions. As Lyndon stroked Year 3's fur, she felt the weight of months of struggle begin to lift. Weeks passed like a slow healing wound, each day bringing more justice to light. In the county courthouse where he once presided, Judge Harlan Voss now sat as a defendant, his distinguished silver hair dulled by prison-issued clothing. The charges against him, Haskett and Crowder, filled 3 pages: conspiracy, arson, murder, and corruption that had poisoned the county for years. The medical examiner's revised report landed hard. Handler Merritt Boone's death was officially ruled a homicide. His widow, Sarah, accepted his posthumous Medal of Valor with tears streaming down her face. "He never stopped fighting for what was right," she said, clutching the medal. Deputy Lyndon Price's testimony before the grand jury lasted 6 hours. She spoke clearly and firmly, laying out every detail of the conspiracy. Her reinstatement papers arrived without fanfare, just a quiet acknowledgement that she had been right all along. In the hospital, Reeves Talcott worked through his physical therapy with the same determination he'd shown throughout the investigation. His injuries would heal, the doctors said, leaving only scars to remember the fight by. Ivy McCrae left town under witness protection, her new identity a fresh start. Before departing, she hugged Lyndon tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being the first person to really see me." Her eyes now held hope instead of fear as she walked toward her future. No longer a prisoner, but free. Lyndon adjusted her newly pressed K9 trainer's uniform in the morning light. The promotion felt right, like coming full circle. Sarah Boone waited on her porch, a gentle breeze stirring the wind chimes Merritt had hung years ago. "He would be proud," Sarah said softly, as Lyndon presented Merritt's restored badge. Together they placed it in a wooden case beside Lyndon's own badge, a testament to 2 paths of integrity that had crossed through darkness to find justice. Later, at May's Diner, sunlight streamed through the windows as Reeves slid into their usual booth. His smile held something deeper now, something that had grown from trust forged in fire. Year 3, Y3, stretched contentedly at their feet, his coat glossy and his old injuries fully healed. Lyndon wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, feeling its warmth. Beyond the diner's windows, the mountains stood eternal against the morning sky. Every piece of the journey, the mysterious bookshelf, Y3's urgent barking, the losses and victories, had led her here, to peace, to purpose, to the quiet joy of earned love sharing breakfast in a sun-filled booth. "Ready for another day?" Reeves asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "More than ready," she replied, knowing it was true. "Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.